the whole season was in a sort of minor key,
Right.
and there's an almost somnambulistic kind of thing that Kendall had to walk, through everything and depression, I think, does feel like there's a scrim between you and the world, and a pane of glass between you and the world.
So let me ask you a little bit about Kendall's journey, specifically in season 2. When did you know where season 2 was going to end up? When did you first learn about Kendall's betrayal of his father?
I knew from the very beginning.
Oh, wow.
In sort of broad strokes, Jesse Armstrong kind of mapped out the contours for me.
This is the day his reign ends.
I remember reading Kazan's autobiography, and he said this thing that the most important moment in a play, or and it applies to film or television, is the final beat, sort of, where the journey ends, and then you have to kind of arc it back as far as you possibly can and travel that distance. So it did feel, I felt excited by it, but also challenged because, as you know, it's not really a linear journey. It's as if the character is sort of like playing dead. And then in the last 2 minutes of the final episode, kind of pounces. And I don't think he's playing dead. I think he is pretty dead inside. And so Jesse sort of talked about it in the context of almost like the Manchurian Candidate, like someone who had been sort of lobotomized and defeated and was completely subjugated and kind of weaponized to be used as my father's, I was going to say attack dog, but it's more like a sort of
like a bludgeon or
abused Labrador. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Kendall does feel a lot in this season like someone who kind of wishes they hadn't come out of the lake at the end of season 1. How did you find that desolation inside of you, and how did you live there? It's like it's like how a person can't hold their breath until they die because your body kicks back in and wants to live. How did you kind of force your own head under as you were performing?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and I think that was the question that I faced as an actor. I've never done something like this before, something that needed to be so internal.
Right.
Because as you know, a lot of it is in the writing, but as Jesse said to me in that conversation, most of it is going to be subtext, and most of it is going to be sort of subterranean, sort of emotional layers underneath the writing, with very little to sort of express or indicate what's going on. So it did feel, like you say, it did feel that the only way to possibly tell the story authentically was to just embody that desolation and sort of take on the weight. And in a sense, and this is hard for an actor because it's kind of a truism that you have to play something active, and this was almost the it's like the color black being the absence of light. That it felt like I needed to become a sort of black hole. But as we were shooting over the course of, I think, about 7 months, I just had to kind of hold myself there. So I was greatly relieved when we finished filming. I think it was episode 7, when my father makes me go to the house of Andrew Dodd's parents. And that was a really harrowing day of filming. And I remember the way that house smelled, not to disparage.
Oh no, I know what you mean.
But you know what I mean? It was very visceral and very devastating. I felt completely devastated by that kitchen and by the pictures on the walls. And I didn't go in the house until we were shooting. and then a camera just sort of followed me in. And one thing that's really wonderful about this show is how little we talk about what may or may not happen in a scene, how open they are to discovery, and how not prescribed anything is. So I got to really just go in the house and have that experience. But after that day, this character who had been trapped under the ice for so long, the light had almost completely been extinguished, and he's sort of nearly annihilated. After that day, there was nothing else in the writing that signified that he was in touch with the anguish any longer, and instead had sort of accommodated himself to what happened, as people do. And and then he sort of swings wildly into a kind of love rocket, and the rap that we saw, and
the rap,
all these things that are kind of extreme kind of rebounds from the sort of quiet devastation.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I ask because it's such an effective representation of depression that we don't always get, because Kendall is theoretically quite functional. He's still being his dad's, kind of, I don't know, I'm thinking about Walter again, but yeah, his sort of attack dog, his henchman, and he's still walking around the world, but you somehow had found a way to extinguish that light in his eyes. And I think, it was incredible to watch. And so then to see him on the roof of a 75 floor building, it was gut wrenching. It was tragic, and we didn't really talk about it. No one talked about it on the show. And I think that's really interesting, the way you were able to bring that by just being quiet, and not just being quiet, but holding that in yourself. So that was amazing.
Thank you.
Can we talk a little bit about that scene between Kendall and Logan, the Fredo kiss and all of that?
Yeah.
You have a specific point as an actor that you think you decided what Kendall was going to do, or was Kendall always did he always have this plan in place, or do you think his conversation with Logan affected that, or how did you play that? If you don't mind sharing, but if you don't want to share, that's totally fine.
No, I can talk a little bit about it. Some of that stuff is still,
sure.
But it sort of needs to live on the vine. But I will say it was an example of the sort of close collaboration that I'm very lucky to have with Jesse, because I felt, and he and I might not have the same answer to that question.
Right.
But I felt like, certainly it was not my intention. My intention up to that point was I felt like I needed to pay for my sins. And atone, and it would have been an act of penance to take on the sins of the company and take the fall. I felt like there was not much left to live for, and that I deserved it. And I think I say that in that scene.
Oh yeah, you do repeatedly.
I deserve it. Maybe I deserve it.
Oh no, son.
Yeah, for everything.
No. God, no.
It's good to pay. The boy.
No, not that. On RPI, you're the best. Don't beat yourself up. No real person involved.
I felt in the scene as it was initially written that there was a sort of, there was a trigger and there was a hammer, but there wasn't yet like a firing pin. And I needed one to be a catalyst for what needed to happen. I think originally, as written, it was my dad saying that you're not a killer. And for me personally, that wasn't new information. That was something that he essentially said to me in the very first episode.
Right.
And then Jesse sort of did some rewrites, and I expressed how I felt. But one night, I think he woke up at like 2 a.m. and had this sort of pin drop that Logan could tie no real person involved to what had happened with the boy. And for me, that was like seeing the Gorgon head.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So for me, that was a decisive moment, and brought the fire in Kendall sort of raging back to life.
Absolutely. Can you tell me more about your relationship with Jesse and how you and the writers have kind of worked together to create Kendall as he is with all his flaws and foibles?
Jesse and I think there's a great deal of trust. I think he knows how much I sort of revere him, and how much I internalize what he's written and come prepared with what he's written. And then I've also never once had an impulse stifled, and I usually come pretty loaded up with a lot of my own thoughts and instincts and write stuff, and part of that is Adam McKay. Adam is a very, he comes from the tradition of improv and sort of yes and. So you can riff on things. And so the challenge in a way is, doing all your homework and the research so that you can riff in the idiom of the character and know enough about the media landscape and, the given circumstances to be able to sort of improvise. But I guess I feel so dialed into the character, and Jesse knows that I am, that he really he gives me a lot of freedom.
The spirit of collaboration on this show is amazing. I've read a little bit about how the rap came into fruition with your working with Nicholas Patel and how did you? That is that must have really tested your yes and powers. Tell me a little bit about throwing yourself into that. Very, very, very impressive.
I guess if I have anything in common with Kendall, it is a sort of I will throw myself into things for better or worse, and so it felt like, okay, well, this is the moment that I'm going to make a giant fool of myself. But that's kind of what Kendall is wagering also.
Oh, yeah.
And there's always this sort of doubling of what I might feel about something and then accepting it. I remember I say these things because they've informed so much about how I think about acting. I read this interview with Ben Kingsley years and years ago when he was playing Hamlet in Stratford on their second stage. And he talked about being backstage in the wings and having this thought, I can't possibly play Hamlet. I'm not a great actor. I'm not a hero. And then he realized that Hamlet's entire conflict and sort of engine is I'm not a hero. So in that sense, there's a lot of the kind of the way that Kendall kind of overshoots the mark. It's an invitation for me to just, kind of really go for it. And I had no idea how the rap was going to turn out. I'd never done it, in front of anyone until we shot it.
Oh my God.
And
that's
so that
very
was fun.
stressful to hear.
That was fun because, well, I think you enter into a place after shooting for so long.
Sure.
I really felt like I was just giving a rap at a party for my dad with a bunch of random, who cares people in Dundee. So the stakes didn't feel like, there's never an element of feeling like I have to perform this thing for a TV show, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It totally does.
So
that's amazing.
I felt, I didn't know if I'd be able to do it. And I got to, I think I made, I got to sketch. I had an idea of a jersey that I could wear, which I sketched out on the thing. And so they made this jersey and Nick's rap originally, and Nick is a genius, didn't have any a melody or any sort of singing in the chorus. And I remember being in the car with this poor driver, and I was sort of just trying out different melodies. And I sort of finally landed on one that felt right to me.
L to the OG. Dude be the OG, and he playing like a pro. See.
So that was something that they just sort of let me do, and that worked, and gave me a feeling of ownership over this tribute to my dad.
Yeah.
But what we shot, and we had 3 cameras that day, the reaction of my siblings and the reaction of all the people was just a live reaction. And so there's a and I think they were pretty stunned and horrified. But it's a great way of working when you can capture the moment as it's coming into being.
Right.